I'm Mary Beth Watt, Community Investment Officer for the Federal Home Loan Bank of Indianapolis, and it is my privilege to serve as the chair of CHIP's Board of Directors. Thank you for joining us as we celebrate CHIP and its more than 20 years of service to the community. First, a few housekeeping items. If you could please silence your mobile devices for the course of the event, I would really appreciate your cooperation. However, as you reach for your device to silence them, I do invite you to get social and share your celebration experience on Facebook and Twitter throughout the evening. Before we get started, I want to take a moment to thank some special people. First, I'd like to thank our presenting sponsor, the Sumerian Foundation, Inc., our platinum level sponsor, Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield, and our gold level sponsors, Eskenazi Health and Merchants Affordable Housing Corporation. Without the support of these lead sponsors, as well as our silver, champion, and half-table sponsors who are listed in your program, we would not be able to meet and exceed our fundraising goal for this event, which supports our works to collectively end homelessness in Indianapolis. Please join me in thanking our sponsors. In addition, I would like to recognize Lilly Endowment, Inc. and the Central Indiana Community Foundation for the significant annual support they have provided CHIP over the past 20 years. They provide leadership and vision that in many ways shapes how our community addresses homelessness today. We thank you. I also extend great thanks to Michael Atwood and Clayton Taylor at WFYI for being wonderful partners and for creating compelling videos to recognize a few of our special award winners tonight. Thank you. So we have a great audience, what a great turnout, and this evening we are honored to have some elected officials in the audience with us. Would you please stand so we may thank you for your leadership and your support of the cause to end homelessness. Next, I would like to recognize my fellow CHIP board members and CHIP staff. If you are a current or former board member or a member of CHIP staff, would you please stand so we may thank you for your service. And as part of the CHIP family, we would like to acknowledge a special guest, David Tavidian, who is here with us tonight. The CHIP family is so happy you're able to join us for the celebration. Another significant group represented this evening are those who work directly with individuals and families experiencing homelessness. If you are a service provider or a volunteer working with those experiencing homelessness, would you please stand and be recognized? Finally, and most importantly, I would like to acknowledge our guests with us who have experienced homelessness. We are inspired by your perseverance to survive and overcome barriers. We stand by you, and together we are committed to ending homelessness for everyone in our community. I thank you for your courage, inspiration, advocacy, and for all the ways that you contribute to and enrich our community. Thank you so much. Now we will start with our award presentations. It is my pleasure to introduce our first award recipient tonight. The William A. Crawford Public Service Award is named in honor of State Representative Bill Crawford, a public servant dedicated to advocating for those experiencing homelessness in Indianapolis. This award is given to an individual or group of public servants dedicated to raising awareness and inspiring action to end homelessness and poverty. This year, it is my pleasure to present this award to Mayor Joe Hogsett for his administration's commitment and achievement of the Mayor's 400 Challenge. Issued in April 2017, Mayor Hogsett pledged to create 400 new units of permanent housing for individuals and families experiencing homelessness. Not only did Mayor Hogsett fulfill this challenge, he exceeded it. Please help me welcome our mayor to the stage.
Well, good evening. I know there's a full agenda, so I will be brief, although many of you know and have known me for a while, and that's sometimes difficult. First of all, let me congratulate all of you. I have had the great honor of attending this celebration. This is my third year now. Actually, I think I attended it even before becoming mayor, but at least since my term began, this reception and the attendance at this fundraising celebration for the recognition of those who will be given it tonight is getting bigger and better every year. And I want to thank you for that. And I want you to give yourself a large round of applause for standing up for the important moral issues of our day. And I'd be remiss if I didn't give credit where credit's due. The city has many collaborators in our effort for the 400 Challenge. Following the State of the City address in 2017, the truth is we received all kinds of commitments from developers, from community partners, from philanthropic, not-for-profit, charitable entities to help find a route for those experiencing homelessness. And not just a route to a temporary shelter, but a route to a home. CHIP, of course, a leading light in that regard. Horizon House, the Indianapolis Housing Agency, the Hoosier Veterans Assistance Foundation, TWG, the Glick Company, and others all came to the table because they know homelessness is an emergency, the same as any other emergency, worthy of our immediate, committed response. For we cannot grow accustomed. We must not allow ourselves to grow accustomed to a permanent state of homelessness for the men, the women, and the children in our city. And we cannot blame our way out of homelessness. We cannot moralize or shame our way out of homelessness. We cannot simply hide from it. It will only grow. We must, in the final analysis, act. Act to make sure all in our city have a path to a permanent home. Act to make sure that all in our city have a path to nutritious, affordable food. Act to make sure that all in our city have a path to a quality education. Act to make sure that all in our city can live a healthy life. Act to make all instances of homelessness temporary and brief. And so, on behalf of all of those who do act, I am proud to accept this award.
Thank you, Mayor Hogsett. Our next award, the Joseph W. Fahey Caring for Our Neighbors Award, is named after newspaper reporter and former CHIP planning director Joe Fahey, who was credited with drafting the original blueprint to end homelessness. This award is given to an individual, group, or entity dedicated to raising awareness and inspiring action to end homelessness and poverty. To introduce this year's award recipient, we have a brief video to share with you.
The SOAR initiative is Street Outreach and Animal Response. We work with individuals who are experiencing homelessness or crisis like medical or mental health crisis, emergency hospitalization, domestic violence, primarily who have pets.
She is unique in her own way that she completely created this organization all just from the ground up. And so she herself is also a very unique individual, and you can't find anyone like her.
Don't you get mad, don't you get jealous. Don't you get jealous. I spent the better part of almost 10 years on and off the streets. Even in my own homelessness, there have been times in which someone walked by and a child may have said, you know, look at that woman, Mom, and she says, don't look. And so frequently people are on the streets and no one, they pretend like they're not seen. You know, people pretend like they don't see the people that are before them, sometimes struggling or suffering.
One of the things that people don't really understand is how important the bond is between a human and their animal, and a lot of the barriers that come with that, especially for folks experiencing homelessness.
We seek to preserve the bond between person and pet and remove the barriers that pet ownership can bring to accessing services.
It's cool, but at first I didn't want it because I'm not the type of person that asks anybody for any help. I don't like getting help from nobody. But when it came to my dog, yeah, I'm gonna take help whether I want it or not. If these dogs hadn't been in my life probably would done been over by now. A dog is a lifesaver, no matter how you look at it.
Working alongside Angela is incredibly inspiring, to say the least. She has one of the most special ways of connecting with people that I've ever seen with any provider. She can bring it to the level of that person. She meets them where they're at every single time. She interacts with anybody, and you can see it with the pets too. I mean, she kind of observes the situation and within seconds knows exactly how to handle that animal and connect with the animal as well as the human, and to make both feel extremely safe wherever they are.
Not tough as I am, but she's tough. I give it that much. She's real tough.
To serving individuals experiencing homelessness or housing crisis along with their pets. Join me in congratulating Angela Hobson.
Like the mayor, I really struggled to be brief. And how cool is it that I got to follow you? Like, I finally made it, right? I first want to give some quick thanks. One is to my children who are over there. You can stand up real briefly, yes, or wave. as part of what I do, my kids have made a huge sacrifice for me following this crazy dream of mine, and we often have a huge menagerie of pets and people in our home, and I am very thankful for them opening their lives to help heal living things, including myself. It's a tall order, and I want you guys to know that I'm thankful for you. I'm going to try not to be emotional. So thank you sincerely to the Celebration Committee for this award. I read quite a bit about Joseph W. Fahey after receiving this award. I'm very passionate about people and their stories, and I wasn't disappointed by his. Some of the things that stood out to me were stories about his parents and their kindness, and how they often gave most of what they had, even though that they had very little. In addition to that, there were stories about Joe himself. One of his colleagues had said something after winning an award about Joe. He said, let me make it correct. He said, his sense of Irish outrage towards injustice, tempered by his decency and firm belief in the dignity of those that were less fortunate, were some of his greatest qualities as a journalist. I wasn't disappointed at all in reading about him and resonated quite a bit with his life. And I would go so far to argue that they weren't just the greatest qualities of him as a journalist, but as a human being and an advocate for those less fortunate. It's hard to think about what to say when you know you're only going to have 2 to 3 minutes, because I am not a 2 to 3 minute person. And I'm sure that there might have been a couple people that were a little worried about putting me before a microphone, because I'm quite the Irish outrage person myself. But I thought that focusing on some things that I took away from the man who the award I received is named after would be fitting for this occasion. Joe was able to make an impact because of 2 important things that I noticed. One is because he saw human beings for who they were. No matter where he met them at in life, what station they were at in life when they crossed paths, he never judged the character of the person as self. He did everything that he could to get to know the person on their level so that there was an authentic connection. This is very critical and rare. I think that we could all work on this a little bit more. It doesn't come natural to everyone, and that's perfectly okay, but it is inexplicably huge for those who are especially suffering homelessness to be seen as a whole person and not as that of their struggle. The other thing that Joe did was to use his gifts. His love of literature and his honed writing skill, his advocacy, and his ability to really hold people accountable out here in the community for how they treat others. He used these gifts to impact change through action. All of our gifts are very different and unique. Everyone in this room has gifts, some that you may even take for granted that are valuable to the community. And we need to use these gifts in ways that can impact change out here in the communities. It doesn't matter, your gift doesn't have to be as profound as a Joe Fahey, okay? I have women that come that clean litter boxes and mop the floor, and the gift that they provide to our organization is as important and as critical as someone that uses specialized skill to build our website or go over our books. Every gift matters out here and is useful. Please take the time to use your gifts and be proud of the gifts that you have to offer. A lot of times I think that people don't get involved because they don't have the time or they don't feel like they have enough to give. You do. Even in small bits, your piece in the puzzle matters. There are people out here that are waiting to heal. I was one of them. Obviously, they spoke about my homelessness in this video, and it was because of individuals that believed in me and saw me for the whole person that I'm here standing before you today being able to help others, and it's amazing. So I just urge everyone to be able to give your gift and really take the time to know some of the people that are out here that you see. I know many people chuckled with Tony, and he's a familiar face. Say hello. Say hello. You'd be surprised to learn about some of the amazing individuals that are behind those experiencing homelessness. And thank you.
Thank you, Angela, for sharing your gifts. The Corporate Partner Award is given to a for-profit organization that has made an impact in ending homelessness through a unique or innovative way. This year, we are recognizing Charles Schwab. The Charles Schwab Foundation provides financial support to a variety of charities and community events selected by Schwab employees. Through financial education programs, employee volunteerism, and community involvement, they strive to make a positive impact in the communities where they live and work. Locally, Charles Schwab has partnered with CHIP extensively via multiple volunteer events, Schwab Volunteer Week, and the Pro Bono Challenge. Schwab partners with CHIP to bring volunteer activities on site to increase participation and awareness of homelessness in Indianapolis. Please join me in welcoming Blythe Alderton, the Managing Director of Estate Services, and Charles Schwab to the stage.
All right, thank you. So first and foremost, on behalf of Schwab, we want to thank CHIP for the work that they do to help end homelessness in our community. We are honored to work alongside this amazing group of individuals to assist as we can. CHIP does an excellent job of bringing volunteer opportunities to us, which really makes an impact to us to be able to give back to the communities. So it's oftentimes a kind of funny scene to see, right? They come with cars packed full of groceries as we help them to pack nutritional kits, but they pack those full. They have to bring them into Schwab, go up 4 flights of stairs in the elevator. A lot of work put forth by them to give us an opportunity to bring our people into a room and be able to quickly volunteer and give back to the community. So a huge impact for our service center and a lot of work on their part. So we thank them for their willingness to participate with us in that way. We're really excited about our next opportunity to volunteer with CHIP, which is through our Pro Bono Challenge. So as Angela was talking about gifts, I think this explains what our Pro Bono Challenge is really well. Pro Bono Challenge is just a unique way for people to give back to nonprofit organizations. So instead of kind of packing up a kit, they actually get to take their own gifts, right? Their own strengths that they have and give those to the nonprofits. So it's like a consulting type of activity that they do. And so great for us because we're using a lot of the strengths that we use every day in our businesses, but great for CHIP and other nonprofits because they're getting kind of high value consulting type of activities for this day, and it really helps them to kind of look at things a little bit differently from the business challenges that they face. So we're excited to be able to work again in November with CHIP for the 3rd time with our Pro Bono Challenge. So once again, just thank you, CHIP, for all that you do for our community, and we are humbled to be recognized by you, and we look forward to our continued partnership to help you end homelessness in our community. Thank you.
The Community Collaborator Award is given to an individual or organization that works with the homeless system of care toward a shared goal to improve the community's impact on ending homelessness in Indianapolis. This year, we will be recognizing the Indianapolis Housing Agency, IHA. IHA is a federally funded government housing agency that provides low-income families, seniors, and families with disabilities access to affordable housing in IHA-owned or managed communities or in private market housing with a subsidy through the Housing Choice Voucher Program known as Section 8. CHIP is recognizing IHA as our community collaborator for their partnership with the Indianapolis Coordinated Entry System to provide affordable housing through a homeless preference program for up to 9 eligible families per month. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Jennifer Green, the Interim Executive Director for IHA.
Thank you, everyone, especially thanks to Chip. As she noted, I am the interim director, so I don't have a lot to say. But I would like to say that we are very privileged to have the opportunity to help our homeless neighbors. It's been a long time coming. It's been a lot of work, and especially I want to thank Shantae Taylor, who has been on the front lines with this community effort. Also, our board of directors, our board of commissioners, as they've been behind us. As you know, any government entity to do certain things that you think are easy to do requires board resolutions and regulations and all those kind of things. So I want to thank them too for being part of this and actually passing the resolution to change our administrative plan to allow for these 9 voucher holders every month. And I did want to say that we are very privileged to work with Chip and coordinated entry. And just to announce to everyone tonight that we have been awarded 55 mainstream vouchers will help us also to continue helping disabled homeless. So we're very excited about that. And I thank you very much.
Our next award is the D. William Morrow Jr. Homeless Advocate Award. This award is named in honor of CHIP Director Emeritus Bill Morrow, an advocate driven by a sense of justice and compassion to provide tireless leadership in the effort to end homelessness in Indianapolis. This award is given to an individual who has displayed a long-term commitment to the cause of ending homelessness in Indianapolis. And we have a video to commemorate this year's Homeless Advocate.
And my first impression, that's a very interesting question, because I thought, oh gosh, here I go again. I have to train another person just to be here for another 6 months and then out. But obviously I did a really good job because she's been here a long time.
She came to Midtown with no experience working with the homeless. She came from Department of Corrections. I know she had some anxiety coming in to that, making that shift.
And it was quite a change. The population I was not quite sure of when I did not know much about persons who are experiencing homelessness.
She really came in and learned, and you could really see that once she got into it, how much she cared about the homeless population.
The people that we are working with are extremely vulnerable, and I think probably the most vulnerable, because not only are they persons who are experiencing homelessness, they have all kinds of barriers, and our population that we serve through permanent supportive housing, and I host specifically, also suffer with a serious mental illness.
She would go the extra step. She would work many long hours. She would have this ability to collaborate with multiple agencies in the city to meet the needs of that homeless person.
Personally, when I started, we had 60 units of permanent supportive housing, and we now have 133, so we have grown that substantially, and I'm pretty proud of that.
Corinne is a visionary. She will always work to make sure the best possible outcome is available. With that, she will also make sure that everybody has a voice, especially those that don't have a voice.
And mostly, I have to say I'm the most proud of my staff. I have had the most wonderful staff over the years, and they're the real heroes. They're the ones out there doing the work.
So Corinne, when you retire, don't make any commitments early on. Go have fun, travel, have lots of laughter, enjoy yourself, and just be calm for the first year, and then take on the projects that you want to take on.
I would hope that when, over the course of time after she retires, that she would look back on this time at Midtown and realize that she made a difference.
I'm very grateful to her. She has shown nothing but compassion and kindness towards me and my family, and that I take that with me every day when I work with all of the people that I do, to remember to listen to them, to meet them where they are, to know that I'm going to be able to be a part to help them be successful because I had the guidance to be able to help them.
I'm happy to present the Dean William Morrow Jr. Homeless Advocate Award to my fellow CHIP colleague, Corinne Thornburg, for her 13 years of hard work and passion in serving individuals experiencing homelessness at Eskenazi Midtown Mental Health. Please join me in congratulating Corinne. Unlike Angela, I'm going to be short and sweet. I watched the Emmys last night. It feels just like that. This is the William Morrow Award, and I can't even begin to step in those shoes. Thank you. I am completely humbled and honored for this award. I'd like to thank Eskenazi and Midtown leadership and guidance that I've received over the years, past and present. Just a wonderful organization that is really committed to this. As I said in the video, the staff. Please stand up. Randy and Tyler are here. There's been so many over the years. And CHIP for giving me the opportunity to be on their board, to have a voice and in the continuum of care, and also to all the providers out there that are just amazing people to work with. I'm retired a couple weeks ago, but I know you will carry on this mission, and I'm going to be around and watching you. Thank you. Congratulations, Corinne. Each year we take the time to recognize a service provider in the community who has made a significant impact in ending homelessness through a unique or innovative way. This year's Service Provider Champion has transformed the lives of thousands of children impacted by homelessness by providing free academic intervention programs in partnership with emergency shelters, transitional living facilities, and schools since 2001. This organization works with more than 400 dedicated and trained volunteer tutors each school year. Their staff of educators, social workers, and youth workers, along with volunteer tutors, travel to 8 shelter locations and 6 public schools throughout Indianapolis to provide academic intervention programs to students in grades K through 12 multiple times each week. Their staff provides education-based case management services to the families of the children they serve. Please join me in congratulating Kate Hussey, Chief Operating Officer, and the School on Wheels as our Service Provider Champion.
Wow, this is exciting. Thank you so much to CHIP. You're a tremendous partner of School on Wheels and such an advocate in the community. Thank you. It's an honor to accept this award on behalf of our staff, volunteers, and amazing board, our kiddos, and the families that we serve. It was startling to me to learn that 33% of people experiencing homelessness have a high school education, and that's in stark contrast to a national average of 84%. At School on Wheels, our sole focus is to ensure that our kids have a fighting chance and that they can obtain a high quality of education. And our volunteers and paid staff, the best staff in town, I would have to say. This team is amazing, and so is our board. Many of them are here with me tonight. They work tirelessly to collaborate with our 400 volunteer team and partner with schools, shelters, and transitional housing partners. Many of them are here tonight, so thank you so much. You allow us to do our work, and we are grateful for your partnership. And we know that when we, one little girl last year told her mom, going into tutoring is like, it's magical. And I cannot agree more. That little girl was right. And when we partner tutors, volunteer tutors, and staff with these kids for 30 or more sessions within a school year, 98% of those children are promoted to the next grade level. That is phenomenal. And, you know, I am such a fierce advocate of education, and I love going into the tutoring hour and reading with the child or doing, well, not so much math facts, but I love going in and reading with the child. But the real magic happens when you connect with them on a personal level. So I hear laughter coming out of different offices, you know, once we're telling tutoring stories, and last week I just had to laugh. It was kind of a crazy week. Tutoring's just been going for a few weeks, and I worked with this little boy who was kind of shy at first, and then he started reading with me, and he was adorable. He was such a good reader, and we were connecting, and he looked over at me and he goes, "Miss Kate, how old are you?" And I said, "Well, how old do you think I am?" And he was like, 100? And I said, "Well, not quite, not quite." And he goes, "Well, what about 32? I'm like, 32 is good. I will take 32. So, you know, it is just a tremendous, tremendous opportunity. And I'm going to give a shameless plug now and thank the mayor, because we have an opportunity for anyone to act. If you want to spend the best hour of your week, this fine team at Table 19 would be happy to talk to you after the program. We know in this room more than any other place that we are in a crisis mode. Our services are needed now more than ever before. And if you think one person cannot make a difference, you are wrong. I'm here to tell you, you can, and we see that impact every day. So we'd love to have you, and we're so grateful for this opportunity. Thank you very much.
So thank you to Kate and School on Wheels for the difference you're making in our community. Now we have the award that is always a highlight and an inspiration for me every year at the celebration. The Diamond Service Award is given to a formerly homeless individual who has not only overcome homelessness, but is giving back to individuals or the community in a meaningful way. Each year we have a selection committee determine the recipient. However, this year it was a very tough decision for the committee. Several strong candidates emerged, all of whom work with and in service to those experiencing homelessness. So I want to recognize all of our nominees this year, and please stand when I say your name. Brian Walls, James Miller, Larry Keogh, Michael Schwing, Tiffany Pettiford-Mose, and Wes Doty. We are all amazed by your resilience and your service. I personally thank each one of you for giving back to our community. And now I'll let our video introduce this year's Diamond Service Award recipient.
When I was younger, about 18 or so, I had kind of a experience where I had kind of a falling out with my parents. I was coming out.
LGBTQ youth are about 120% more likely to experience homelessness.
we were fighting quite a lot.
Sarah was very timid. She was tearful a lot when we met. She was confused. She was just struggling with a lot of things in her life.
And they hear inside of political debates, inside of general conversations at home, from the back of the pulpit, they hear that they're unworthy and they hear that they're unloved.
I thought that I was going to be either disabled, you know, on disability, or dead by this time. I didn't have a place to live. So I moved into an abandoned house. It was cold, very, very cold.
I was asked to come do a presentation for Job Links at IYG, the Indiana Youth Group, and it was their social night, actually, and I pretty much thought I fell upon deaf ears. I didn't think anybody was paying attention.
She told us about a Job Links program at Adult and Child, and I met her and I was like, that lady's gonna save my life. She helped me get my certification as a peer, and then I started a job where I was actually being a peer, and then from there I was able to work at Adult and Child. And then one day I go to my mailbox at Adult and Child and I have a business card, and I cried.
While she's quiet, I always say she's kind of fierce, because she will get in there and figure out what needs to happen and just get it done, and asks the right questions. She's an amazing advocate.
Sarah is somebody, no matter what she's doing, she's going to add value to it. She's going to add creativity and humor. She is going to be humble and approach it with humility.
My art gets a lot of different reactions.
Instead of talk therapy, I guess it's a form of art therapy that Sarah does. So she engages somebody to just utilize a different medium to express what they're feeling.
I had given up on myself, and if these people didn't see the light in me, then I wouldn't be where I'm at, and there wouldn't be this light that I give. And I want to be able to continue to grow this light for individuals who may be able to follow in my footsteps. So I always say that my story is full circle. I think that I could write a book and that would be the title. A year after staying in that abandoned house, I put a down payment on my first house. I went down and told her, I was like, so I bought a house, and she was like, what? You didn't tell me any of this? I didn't have to be on disability or dead. I am 24 years old, and I have a business card, and I have a job, and I have a story, and I don't have to be where I'm fighting to love myself anymore. So after the video, there's really not a lot for me to say. I guess that I have to say that through all of that, I have been slowly repairing my relationship with my family, and I really wanted to address that in my video, and I hope that it came off like that. And I really wanted to thank my team at Adult and Child, because with their support and with everything that they've provided with me, they truly have answered every single one of my millions of questions. Like Leah said, I asked the right questions. I asked a million of questions. And just everyone for being here for this journey and supporting me. It's been a long one, and I'm glad to be here to help anyone who can truly follow in my footsteps and help them do it. So yeah.
Isn't that an amazing story? I told you these were compelling videos. So we have honored and recognized a lot of individuals and organizations this evening because ending homelessness requires the collective talents, resources, and commitment of the entire Indianapolis community. No one group or individual has the ability to address these issues alone. If you would like to make a contribution, it is available online. Please visit chipindy.org. Now I have the pleasure of introducing this year's Speaker of Honor. This year's speaker is a research fellow at Chapin Hall at the University of Chicago. He currently leads the Youth Homelessness Agenda at Chapin Hall and has expertise in youth development and youth homelessness. He serves as principal investigator for the Voices of Youth Count, a national research and policy initiative focused on building evidence to support action on ending youth homelessness, and the Youth Outcomes Project, an effort to improve outcomes and measurement related to youth homelessness. Additionally, he has worked as an advisor in the U.S. Administration for Children and Families and was a key contributor to the development of the U.S. government's national strategy to end youth homelessness and efforts on addressing child trauma. Please help me welcome to the stage Dr. Matthew Morton.
Well, after Sarah's video, I feel like I don't have a whole lot to say either. Really incredible, just so powerful to be here in the presence of these honorees this evening. Thank you so much. Thank you to Chip. And good evening, all of you. It's really nice to see you. I found folks have been very friendly, and it's great to be back in the Midwest. I just moved to New York City back in January, so I'm still getting adjusted. You say something like, have a nice day, and they respond, don't tell me what to do. So it's just nice to be back in warm company again. And I also just appreciate this opportunity to spotlight issues around youth homelessness and to take a little bit of time this evening to underscore the importance of these issues, some of which we just heard with Sarah, and what this means for this community and our nation. I'm a nerd. Most of my friends who know me know I'm a pretty big geek. I do a lot of research. I spend a lot of time with data. I like long walks on the beach and evenings of designing unbiased sampling strategies. I measure people's character by the size of their standard errors. So pretty bad, sorry. But the point is I also care a lot about this set of issues, and I think researchers can get a bad rap for being a little impractical and a little disconnected from reality, but I'm committed to bringing better evidence to action to truly end youth homelessness, and I'm so thankful that all of you are part of that journey with me. So what does it take to end youth homelessness? Well, it starts with centering young people. And I think we need to just sort of begin there and reflect on what that means. Youth homelessness is a really specific, in some ways, problem and challenge for all of us to be really thinking about. Homelessness is not unique to youth and young adults, and by which I'm usually talking about adolescents and young adults ages 13 to 25, but it comes at a very specific time of the life cycle. And it has unique implications when it's experienced by adolescents and young adults. And I want to just cite 4 different examples as to why youth homelessness warrants a particularly thoughtful, strategic response around this population. First of all, youth homelessness takes place at a very important developmental window in our lives. Most of us have probably heard about the importance of the first 1,000 days, right? How many of you have heard about that? And I appreciate that. I have a 2-year-old and a toddler, and I see how much he is growing and how rapidly my son is transforming in such a short amount of time. Just over the last week, he went from saying no to no way. And he's learned how to really manipulate me with little changes like that. And really, this is a critical time. But what we hear less about is the massive amounts of growing research from neuroscience, from developmental literature about the importance of adolescence and young adulthood. We have significant brain reorganization that takes place during that period. It's a particularly important time for developing social, emotional skills and experiences that will literally stick with us and transform our trajectories throughout our lives. That's a great opportunity if we are nurtured and supported, if we have opportunities for empowerment and using our skills. That helps us to be more productive citizens and make more positive transitions to adulthood. On the other hand, it's a missed opportunity if we are experiencing homelessness and housing instability and the associated adversity and trauma that comes with homelessness. Youth homelessness is also unique because it tends to be particularly hidden. Youth have access to social networks often that they can rely on, and sometimes those can be risky and unhealthy and exploitative for young people, but it means that many young people are couch surfing, they're doubling up, they're in and out of literal homelessness and other types of sleeping arrangements. And young people are particularly sensitive to social stigma that's associated with homelessness. So it makes it very difficult to point out somebody on the street that might be associated with that image that we all have in our heads of what homelessness looks like, and actually apply that to a lot of youth who are really experiencing homelessness. And then third, we know that from a growing body of research that youth homelessness is the single largest pathway into adult homelessness. Youth homelessness turns out to be the single largest pathway into adult homelessness and chronic homelessness. It's not just an eviction shock, it's not just a domestic violence incident or substance use. It's actually starting younger. And so if we really care about tackling the homelessness challenge overall, we need to begin early, and we need to focus on youth and young adults as part of that broader effort. And then fourth, it involves different programs and policy levers. Think systems where we can engage earlier, like schools, foster care, juvenile justice, and think programs like youth-specific shelters or transitional housing programs or youth-specific housing models. It is not comfortable and safe for many 20-year-olds to go into a shelter that predominantly has 40, 45-year-olds staying there. And so we need to think about youth-specific interventions. I also want to say that youth homelessness comes at a very specific time of our developmental period, in that this is also a chance to be thinking about hope. And this is a particularly important opportunity to be thinking about empowerment. Amartya Sen had once said, Amartya Sen was a Nobel Prize winner in economics, and he had written that poverty is not just a lack of money. It is not having the capability to realize one's full potential as a human being. That capability could also be said of homelessness, that loss, that deprivation of capability. It's a lack of freedom to be able to reach your full potential. I was a lucky one. This is me at age 16. Don't ask me why I'm wearing that necklace. It was Florida in the 1990s. Just ignore that part. But I was a lucky one, you see. I had lost my single-parent mother when I was 5 years old to an airplane accident. I then moved in with my father who was an alcoholic, a great guy, good-spirited, but had reconnected with a woman who was a cocaine addict. And I grew up in a house full of turmoil, mental health problems, substance use problems, police visits, and so on. I had a number of runaway episodes. I grew angry, I grew frustrated. I always did end up coming back, and in part that was because if I didn't come back home, nobody might be there to pick my baby sister up off the floor while my father was off drunk and her mother was locked inside of the door or bathroom high. That sense of responsibility kept me coming back, but also I was lucky in that when I was 15 years old, I was in high school and I wasn't doing that well. But I was connecting with literature because that was a way for me as an introvert to talk to my experience, in a sense, through the characters and stories of people in literature. And my teacher noticed this, and she thought maybe I wasn't being challenged enough in school. So she advocated for me to be promoted to honors classes and AP classes, even when my grades didn't suggest that that was warranted. She also happened to be part of a community effort, a part of a national response for communities to have young people doing something positive for their communities. In my community, youth decided that it wasn't good enough to just plant a tree or paint a mural. They actually wanted to build a teen center, a drop-in center for high-risk youth in the community. Not only that, but they wanted to run it. That meant youth were going to do everything from painting the walls to hiring and firing adult staff. This is pretty radical empowerment. And we had a lot of adults sweating coming in for those job interviews. But the adults that made it through, we knew would be true partners to us. And that experience was transformative. My teacher tried for 2 months to get me to go and join this youth council that was starting this teen center, and I didn't want to go, and I finally went to get her off my back, and I loved it, and it changed my life. And within 2 years, I was part of the leadership team. We raised $1 million as a bunch of 16-year-olds to build out 5 different teen centers across our county, all totally youth-driven. The White House had found out about our experience and had asked me to come deliver their keynote address for the White House's first National Youth Summit when I was 17, and that launched me into this national youth advocacy space overnight, and I've been engaged in these issues ever since. Jay-Z had also had me come and be part of his social media and public awareness campaign. A lot of the young people I usually talk to tell me to start off with that part. But those sort of early experiences were highly empowering for me, and they involved people putting hope in me when I didn't put it in myself, much like what Sarah had mentioned. The other thing that it taught me was that youth and adolescence is a really important time for empowerment. We tend to think differently. We tend to apply a child model to adolescents and youth, and we treat that as a time to tell youth and adolescents what to do, to educate them on the risks, to go with a risk avoidance approach. That to me doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and the more I've now as a researcher investigated the evidence, it really makes even less sense. Adolescents and young people are literally hardwired to take risks. Asking adolescents and youth not to take risks is like asking the Pope to break dance. I don't know, maybe the Pope's a great break dancer, but it's actually against our developmental foundations not to take risks. The challenge, I think, is to channel those risks, to provide healthy, positive opportunities for young people to take risks. Young people are much like a race car, which probably is a reasonable metaphor for Indianapolis. And when you think about youth and adolescents, and the tendency is to throw a young person a manual, say don't do drugs, or don't do this, don't do that, and here's all the information you need. The research shows that young people actually understand. They have the information on the risk. The problem is that they still need opportunities to take risks, and they're taking the wrong ones because they don't have better opportunities. So what does a race car need? Any ideas? An engine.
Fuel? Track? A driver? Yeah, that helps a lot too. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Yeah. We call this a pit crew. All right. So I think what adolescents really need, what young people really need in their community is a track, which for me was the teen center. For young people, it could be something else, and a pit crew.
And for me, that was my teacher, who was just in that last photo. And they were the many people who came along in my life along the way and were the ones who knew how to support me at exactly the right time and then how to get out of the way so that I could just drive. And when I think about people like Sarah in our communities and the potential that we have before us, if we let young people just drive, that can be incredibly powerful as an ingredient towards ending youth homelessness in our community. The other part of this that I think is really important, and the reason why I didn't just stick with developing teen centers and programs for youth experiencing homelessness, was because I was feeling like a lot of youth remained invisible. And this is the story of one young person, or a quote from one young person who was experiencing homelessness recently, and says, I was sleeping on the streets before I got arrested, sleeping in a bus station or in motels when I could. I took drugs not to think about it, not to think about the fact that I might have to stay, not have somewhere to stay, that I might have to sleep on the street. I'm ashamed of it. I just wanted stability. I didn't have anything stable, anywhere stable to live. I just wanted stability. That quote happens to have been from my little sister over the last year, who still struggles with homelessness and housing instability. And thousands of young people across the country, I've come to realize, are much like my sister. They remain invisible to the systems and the services and the decision makers in our community. So I came into research because I wanted to use evidence to make the invisible visible. I wanted to shed light on our blind spots. And when you think about youth homelessness, it is a significant blind spot for our society. It's not the way that most people think about homelessness. It's not what homelessness looks like for most young people. But also for those of us who already care about this issue and lead on this issue, there are blind spots even to us about who's not being served and who could be served better and how young people are doing over time. Evidence and data can be a really powerful tool that all of us should be challenging ourselves to work with more aggressively. We found with the first national survey of youth homelessness to date that 1 in 30 adolescents had experienced some form of homelessness within a 12-month period. And that number reached to 1 in 10 young adults ages 18 to 25 experiencing some form of homelessness within a 1-year period. About half of those experiences involving couch surfing without a safe and stable living arrangement. And we also found that rural homelessness was just as prevalent as urban homelessness. Now, there are more human beings living in urban communities, so there were more people experiencing homelessness. But as a share of the population, this is just as much a challenge in rural communities. But it looks different in rural communities. Youth were twice as likely to be staying with others or couch surfing in rural communities and half as likely to stay in shelters, which makes sense, right? Because if you don't have shelters, you can't stay in them. But it reinforces that increased invisibility, that increased hiddenness of homelessness in certain communities. Just because it is invisible to us doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And similarly, not all youth have the same risk of experiencing homelessness. And these are challenges of equity that we have to center in our work to end youth homelessness for good. If Black, African American, or other youth of color, Hispanic youth, American Indian, Alaska Native youth were far more likely to experience homelessness than their peers. LGBTQ youth were also more than twice as likely to experience homelessness than their peers. And often there's an intersectionality. Youth of color who identified as LGBTQ had 4 times the risk of experiencing homelessness as youth who identified as white, heterosexual, and cisgender. We cannot end youth homelessness unless we center equity and inclusion in our work to do so. The other important part about homelessness is the key work of going upstream. So when you think about, sorry, this is a little bit skewed, we really have to get beyond thinking about a crisis response alone. We have to be able to go upstream if we want to end youth homelessness sustainably. This pie chart has come off a little bit funny, but basically what it's telling you is of the 215 youth we did in-depth interviews with in 5 communities, 3/4 of them had experiences of homelessness starting when they were minors. 1 in 4 of them had family homelessness experiences prior to unaccompanied youth homelessness experiences. So these are major entry points. These are major opportunities that are currently missed. And when we look at individual stories like Bailey, Bailey was from San Diego. And what we did was we asked every young person to explain where their homelessness story began. And they could have started it a week ago, or they could have started it in the first week of their life. But many of them started it well into their early childhood. So Bailey started her story when she was 1 to 4 years old. We talked to her at age 17 in a crisis shelter. And Bailey had started her experience first with multiple moves in different states with her mother. She stayed in homeless shelters. Eventually, at around age 4, her mother commits suicide. And then Bailey goes in and out of different foster care homes, some of which she describes as abusive. Bailey runs away from those homes. She ends up couch surfing, and then she comes back and she stays with her father, who is estranged to her, and she didn't know her father. She gets into arguments with father and stepmother, gets kicked out of the house or leaves the house, ends up again couch surfing or in motels and hotels. And she tries to get into a shelter, but she can't because she doesn't have parental consent and she's only 17. So she goes back in and out of more literal forms of homelessness or staying with other people. Finally, dad gives consent and she gets into an emergency shelter. This is just one of 215 stories that we looked at in depth. And 3 main messages I think are important to take away from Bailey's example here. First is that every story, every trajectory is unique. None of these looked exactly the same. And that's why it's so important to listen to the voices of young people as we craft strategies, to listen to the complexity and the nuance so that we're not just creating cookie cutter solutions. Second is the fluidity in and out of homelessness. Young people often aren't just sleeping on a street corner, or they're not just couch surfing. They're going between different types of sleeping arrangements. They're coming in and out of homelessness until they exhaust all their resources and they have no option but to stay just on the street. And then the third thing that I think is apparent here are all the missed opportunities for early prevention and early intervention. Bailey should have never had to arrive at an emergency shelter. There were so many chances that we could have intervened earlier in her experience, in her story. There were missed opportunities for young people like Bailey, but they don't have to be missed opportunities for young people that are in our community right now. And we know major entry points where we can begin. So we surveyed thousands of youth experiencing homelessness in 22 counties across the country. Of those youth experiencing homelessness on a given night, 29% had been in foster care, which is pretty astounding when you consider that only 2% of youth in the general population have been in foster care. Almost half of the youth experiencing homelessness had been in juvenile detention, prison, or jail. And that's not even counting broader contacts with juvenile or criminal justice system. And a third of the youth experiencing homelessness as young adults had lacked a high school diploma or GED. In fact, that was the strongest statistical correlate we found with young adults experiencing homelessness, was the lack of a high school diploma. So these are major systems where we could be making a difference and going upstream earlier and faster. And this challenges us to see housing as the launch pad, not the end game. Really thinking about the broader outcomes that we can achieve for young people. We are doing this in other sectors, so this is an example in Chapin Hall where we're paying attention not just to housing, but we have a well-being dashboard that child welfare systems are starting to implement for youth. We're paying attention to all kinds of outcomes related to their well-being, not just one like housing stability, and thinking about what the young person needs to be able to stay stably housed and to achieve well-being and success. We can do this in homelessness approaches and build out homelessness systems to take the whole youth into account as well. Even abroad, so before I worked here, I was working in Afghanistan and India, and we worked on anti-poverty programs. One of those examples is this intervention by Brock, one of the best NGOs globally around poverty reduction. And what they've started with was something like giving livestock, and they realized that people would get livestock, they would get some assets, and then they would re-enter poverty. I'm not suggesting that we give young people livestock, although I would have loved to have a goat when I was 15. But what I'm suggesting here is that what they realized was that they needed to do more. They needed to string along a series of interventions tailored to an individual use needs or person's needs to succeed. So they built in a graduation model of starting with a bit of support. In homelessness, we might think of that as housing. And then layering on top of that quickly the coaching, the positive connections, the skills, and the opportunities and access to finance that these, in this case, ultra-poor women in places like Bangladesh and India needed to succeed. The results were pretty astounding. They did multiple randomized trials. Those are the most rigorous types of impact evaluations you could do. They did them in 6 different countries with about 21,000 women in the poorest situations. These were the hardest families to bring out of poverty. And they sustained their impacts over a 2 or 3 year period or longer. Not only did they sustain those impacts, but in places like India, for every dollar invested, there was a $4.33 return in terms of their gains of productivity for these women. If we can do this in places like Afghanistan and India and Bangladesh, why can't we do this with youth homelessness in one of the wealthiest countries in the world? Why can't we think about a progressive engagement model that treats housing as the launch pad, but not the end game for young people? And so I would challenge us to think more about a broader perspective. And that brings me to the last point I'd just like to highlight for ending youth homelessness. And that's that it takes a public health response. How many of you have heard the term triage or crisis response in homelessness? Almost everybody, right? Now, I'm not here to disparage triage or crisis response. As the mayor said very well, we have an emergency. We have a crisis. But let's think about what this means. Triage is a term that comes from war. This photo was from World War I, where the term triage was popularized by the French. It meant that they had so many bodies strewn all over the floor, and they had limited medical resources that they needed to apply to that challenge, to that crisis in a moment, that they couldn't serve everybody at once, so they had to figure out who was most likely to die and therefore get medical attention, even though others might have needed it. That's the model that we're working with in homelessness right now. And that's, when you reflect on it, a pretty sad statement on where we are overall as a nation. That's not a sad statement on the homelessness system or the housing system. They are in crisis. They have limited resources they have to apply to a big challenge. But the fact that we are constantly in crisis and at war with homelessness and having to use triage is a failure of multiple public systems. That's a policy failure, and that is something that we as a society need to own and address. And that takes much more of a public health perspective. So what we tend to see in homelessness, and when you think about homelessness, if you talk with your friends that you say you work on homelessness or you're a funder for homelessness, they might think, okay, well, that's nice, you work on probably shelters, or they might imagine sleeping bags. And so what they're thinking about is that triage, that crisis mode of us being at war with homelessness and people on the streets, which is part of the crisis response and really one end of it. It's the high-risk chronic homelessness among all populations. But if we really want to end homelessness for good, it takes a broader perspective. It takes serious work on prevention, and it takes serious work on sustained exits from homelessness. We wouldn't say for HIV/AIDS that we're going to end HIV/AIDS by treatment alone. We wouldn't say for a good healthcare system that an emergency room is sufficient. But that's akin to saying that a crisis response is sufficient to ending homelessness. And we know it's not. So there are major opportunities where we can engage. And I don't want to highlight the details here. I just want to suggest a different way for us to be thinking about this challenge. On prevention, if we're going upstream, we're thinking about the major public systems, schools, child welfare, juvenile criminal justice that can make a difference. We're thinking about racial equity more upstream and why people end up disproportionately in homelessness. We're thinking about why LGBTQ young people are more likely to experience homelessness and addressing those root causes earlier. And we're thinking on the ends about a better crisis response system that works well for youth. And we're thinking about broader outcomes like that dashboard I mentioned earlier. It's not enough for a young person to simply get housed. And one of the things that we found was that every day of waiting homelessness services for a young person that came into getting assessed in a homelessness system. Every day that they waited on a housing placement increased their likelihood of returning to homelessness after being housed by 2%. So these waits are consequential, and once they come in, they're going to need support. So we need a crisis response that reduces those waits, and then we need to work with them once they're housed to get the positive connections to caring adults, to get stably employed and in education, and to get on a track to well-being. And that can present a much broader picture for what it really takes to end youth homelessness. So I just want to sort of say thank you. I want to appreciate all that you're doing. I want to recognize again the awardees for your amazing contributions. The work that you are doing is a commitment to making the invisible visible, and it is a commitment to making sure that there is no such thing as an unlucky youth. So thank you, and appreciate all of your work.
Thank you, Dr. Morton. So tonight we have learned that we all have gifts. We learned that we can all make a difference. We learned that a comment we make at a meeting we think nobody is listening to can lead to a young person getting their own business card. And we learned from Dr. Morton some statistics, some sobering statistics in some cases about youth homelessness, the unique aspects, that it takes a broad public health perspective to end youth homelessness, and that it takes all of us. This is everyone's conversation. So I thank you all for being here. Please take what you've learned tonight out into the community. Dr. Morton is available in the front if you have some questions that you would like to ask him. He agreed to stand here for a few minutes and answer your questions, and we really appreciate you coming and speaking to our community today. So thank you all. Have a wonderful rest of your evening.